The experience of energy and the experience of the energy transition is just garbage. Prices keep going up and the way you pay for energy keeps changing. Like, we have to solve this experience and make it an absolute no-brainer for people to get on board.
Welcome to the Climate Tech Startups Podcast. I'm Matt Zoffner, founder and CEO of Currents. We're chatting with Benjamin Hilborn, co-founder and CEO of Elastic Energy. Elastic is making every home an automatic participant of the flexible grid, delivering energy security, the lowest bills, and effortless decarbonization. I'm excited to learn more about what Elastic is up to. But before we dive into that, can you tell everyone about your background and your startup journey so far?
How far back do you want me to go?
I know you've been a part of a couple startups in the energy space. As far as you're willing to go back.
Well, I'll rewind to the beginning. Went to school, became a electrical engineer, spent the first bunch of years of my career working at a couple different IoT startups. I did work in industrial IoT and medical devices and consumer electronics, a whole gamut of, making small things, taking them through production, making sure that they talk to each other nicely, all of that kind of stuff. And culminated that chapter in building my first company, solving a whole lot of the problems that I kind of repeatedly ran into while working on all of those other companies. And that was an absolute wild ride. And, the whole kind of device interoperability space is just this insane place. And, from there, it was kind of had the earliest inklings of, okay, energy is this really interesting space. And I want to dig into this a little bit more, learn a little bit more about what's happening with solar and EVs. And, at the time I didn't know what distributed energy was. I didn't know that was a term. I didn't know what a DER was, and ended up working in VC for a couple of years. And it's while I was spending that time helping other startups and, doing deep dives and whatnot, that I kind of finally had that final unlock of, okay, the flexible grid is coming, and there are people working on solving a whole lot of these problems, but there are a whole lot more problems to solve in the space. And that's when it caught my attention fully, and I dove in head first.
So you've been a part of other startups, whether that's with physical electronics, devices, and then you did the VC stuff. So you've probably seen a whole spectrum of technologies and companies solving different problems. I'm curious, how did you get to Elastic, and sort of who are you solving for with that?
Great question. So Elastic came out of basically incessant desire to make the experience of energy better. That everybody I talk to, and everybody I've talked to for the longest time, they're confused by their energy bills. They don't understand why they're so high. They have no idea how to, what is this energy transition thing? Should I get solar? Should I not get? Are EVs as terrible as everybody says they are? I have a background grew up in Alberta, so grew up around a whole lot of EV hate. And I've just kind of always been in this position of, people coming to me to answer these questions, because energy has been this thing for the longest time where you don't really have to think about it, because it's just cheap enough that you don't really have to think about it. And, the way it's been priced is, whatever, I'll just pay the bill and I'll forget about it. Mm-hmm. But that's not the reality anymore. Prices keep going up and the way you pay for energy keeps changing. And so Brandon, my co-founder, and I, we were looking at the space and saying, holy smokes, the experience of energy and the experience of the energy transition is just garbage. And there are companies trying to solve this all in their own individual ways, but there are some really big hurdles that are keeping people away from the energy transition. And if we want to really accelerate decarbonization, we have to solve this experience and make it an absolute no-brainer for people to get on board, right? And if we go right back to the beginning, it wasn't called Elastic. The working title was Green Jerry Can, because the very very first place we thought to solve the experience of the energy transition was solving for range anxiety. And this was the wild idea that we were going after, was essentially a portable emergency backup battery for EVs. And we got we did some interesting stuff with that when we found some early partners. We were like into prototyping and whatnot. And, in a strategy session, just zoomed out and said, well, battery tech is evolving so fast that like by the time this reaches the mass market's not going to need it anymore. And you look at like just last week, I think Lucid publicized they did a 500-mile road trip end to end without stopping.
And they said that Tesla can't keep up for a decade, which is pretty bold statement.
Throwing some shade. Yeah, exactly. But we've reached that point. Like nobody I know wants to drive 500 miles nonstop without finding a bathroom, grabbing some snacks or whatever, and like this is where you top up. Like we have passed that inflection point of, for the right vehicle in the right situation, like range anxiety just doesn't exist anymore. But the general direction stuck around, if we can solve this experience of energy, if we can figure out a way for the average consumer to be a better steward of energy, or a better player in the energy transition without asking a whole lot of them, then we'll have found something pretty magical. And that is that continued belief and approach is what led us to Elastic.
Yeah. So it sounds like you are solving for the general homeowner consumer,
yes,
which there are lots of different types of them. They have wildly different needs, quite different from a B2B business. I find that there's a big information asymmetry that consumers have, because you have all these early adopters who have maybe owned solar for 20 years now, and then you have people who think that they now have to become an active participant in the grid because these costs are so high, and they have outages and crazy weather events, especially on the West Coast. And so how do you think about communicating that for a B2C company, for consumers? Where do you start?
The biggest thing that is kind of the biggest driving force of how we do what we do at Elastic is, don't make the consumer have to care, because that is the easiest way to run into a massive roadblock, because getting people to care about something that they don't already care about is a non-starter. And so the way that we've designed Elastic is we're working with distribution partners that are already servicing these homeowners, providing them with things that they have asked for, and Elastic essentially just piggybacks on those to get into the home and start doing the good work that we can do, and just giving the consumer the benefit right out of the gate without asking essentially anything of them. And at the end of the day, you're right, every consumer is going to have different wants and desires and pain points, and that's why that's basically a big reason why Elastic exists, to be this autonomous grid interactivity layer for every home, where the homeowner doesn't have to think about it, doesn't have to care about it, and that's it becomes a piece of infrastructure at the end of the day.
It's a layer that it's always in the background, communicating with devices, making smart moves maybe to save money. The way you're saying it is, it sounds like kind of like a brain that's controlling sort of the energy profile of a home. And I can see that extending to any type of building. So it'll be interesting to see how you guys grow in the market, and if you continue to just double down on consumers or go up market. But that is really interesting.
We have some interest from retail and like small commercial as well. Like obviously we're very, very focused on the residential space and making that better for consumers. But it's nice to hear that people want this in more spaces than just the home.
Yeah, there's a lot of problems to solve for all types of constituents. I know that you started a podcast called Intermediate, which I can link down below, where you talk about acquiring the knowledge you need to work in clean energy. Obviously, you've been doing this for the better part of a decade in clean energy. And I'm curious, did doing that project, I know you still put out episodes, did doing that project help you hone in on the problem Elastic is solving? Did it sort of strengthen the positioning of that?
Yeah. The thing about working in energy is it is this massively variable space and also very highly regulated and permitted, right? It's just working in energy is a space where you have to be really, really good at absorbing a whole lot of knowledge because, and I was at a talk at 9-0 just last week with the founder of Durapi and Moon 5, two other companies working in this space. And there was just a really interesting part of the conversation around the innovators, are we moving too fast, or is the existing market moving too slow? And what I came away with is that, both can be true in that, yes, the utilities and the PUCs, yes, there are aspects of working with these players that are slow and require a lot of knowledge, but those exist for good reasons. And there is a very fine balance of, and this is a big part of why intermediate exists, is it's learning to find that balance and knowing enough to find that balance around moving fast and break things, essentially, which doesn't really work in energy. You can't really do that in energy, but also without just kind of sitting back and taking the status quo as unchangeable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, energy is a utility. Everyone deserves energy, and I understand why it's regulated. There are many layers to this, lots of policy, lots of regulation, also lots of venture capital moving into the space. So there is innovation happening. Depends on who you talk to, how fast it's happening. But like you said, you can't break stuff because energy is so crucial to people's life.
It's critical.
I think energy is life, essentially.
Yeah.
So I see why you have to be very careful. I guess speaking more about how energy impacts people, I'm going to your Canadian roots here. I am just curious, are there differences between how people in Canada think about energy versus the US? That might just be the way I think about Canadians are just more progressive in terms of nature. I don't know. But I'm curious, are there differences between your customers and sort of where are you launching Elastic as well?
Great question. So I'm going to say the customer profiles are as varied and diverse as the regulatory markets themselves. So I actually have a very interesting span of experience here, having been raised in Alberta, which is, Texas North. It's oil and gas country in Canada, and carbon-based energy is very cheap in Alberta. My in-laws owned one of the very first Teslas that I had ever seen. They had a super, super early delivery Model S, in the heart of Alberta. So just kind of coming from that environment and growing up there, and now I live in Victoria, BC, which is the climate change and energy transition mecca. I swear every fourth vehicle on the road is an EV. There are EV school buses and delivery trucks and solar on every single block. Houses have solar. It's slightly more prevalent in California, but we even have some hydrogen vehicles here. It's it is definitely a special bubble. But coming back to the question around consumer attitudes around energy, I think in general the West Coast, from British Columbia to all the way down to California, in general Cascadia is this place where alternative and renewable energy is looked upon more in a more friendly light, that hey, this is a good thing. It's not really, there's less of a feeling of hey, this is being pressured on us.
Yeah.
And that there's definitely more of a sense of hey, this is something that I want rather than something that I guess I have to. Right. Whereas if you look kind of centrally in both countries, it's if you're adopting something like this, it's going to be much more of a, it makes dollars and cents sense to do this, which is, I think, a great balance to have to be across those two markets. And, our initial markets are California and Texas, because obviously it's great that we're doing good things for the planet, but we have to do it in a way that, this is a sustainable business and this is a profitable business. Otherwise, we can't keep doing the good work that we do.
That's interesting. And so as a part of your journey building Elastic, I would be remiss if I didn't ask about this. So I followed you on Twitter. Mm-hmm. You started a series where you said you bought a one-way ticket to San Francisco to raise money, and people can follow your journey. and it was super interesting to follow, and I was commenting and liking some of the posts. How did you come up with this idea, and are you willing to share any insights you learned from that experience? So, talking to other founders, like, do you recommend they do something like this?
Yeah, I think so. The capital is everywhere. It's not to say that you can't build a company anywhere and you can't raise anywhere. You absolutely can. But the job of a founder is to stack as many odds in your favor as possible. And on fundraising, the highest concentration of available capital, of people that want to talk about solving high value, risk asymmetric problems, like that is San Francisco above anywhere else. And for me, we got to a point with the company where, okay, our biggest hurdle right now, that the biggest problem we need to solve is we need to inject capital into the machine that we've built to solve this problem so that it can run at 10 times the speed. Mm-hmm. And so much to the chagrin of my family, like I have a wife and two kids, but it really was my wife that said, you know what, you like stop thinking about it and just do it. I did just buy a one-way ticket to San Francisco and use that time to network my ass off. And I talked to so many people, ended up at so many different events, doing so many interesting things, and at the end of it came away with a lead investor and a bunch of really warm conversations.
Yeah. I will take that as a recommendation for founders to do that if they feel necessary. And it's funny because you were creating TikTok-like videos that were quite enjoyable to watch.
I appreciate
heads
that.
down in a coffee shop building, just doing cold outreach to investors, attending hackathons. So super cool to see, and I hope you do more of it. And I will likely join you in doing something like that. But before we leave here, I just want to remind everyone that Founders Flow is more about the tactical things for building a company, especially for clean energy companies. So my last question for you is, do you have any tactical advice for hard tech founders looking to build companies in this space?
Understand your risks. Hardware is hard. It's a common cliche. And the name of the game is de-risking. Whether that is, doesn't matter what you're doing. You could be building a smartwatch for children, or you could be building, grid scale solar farms, right? Like it doesn't matter what you're building.
Fusion reactor.
Exactly. De-risk. And the way you de-risk is, there is no one way to de-risk, but, it's by bringing the right people onto your team early. It's by, there are 100,000 small problems to solve. Which one of these can you check off early? It could be as simple as for our fusion reactor. Sure, we have to actually solve the fusion part, but somewhere along the line, like someone has to order steel, right? Mm-hmm. Like that is a absolute solvable problem. And sure, like yes, it is doable, but if you can check that off and just make the list of unknowns smaller, you're de-risking the problem and the opportunity for not just investors but partners, for your team, and the more of the stuff that you can line up early, the more solvable the problem gets, and you can really just focus on the hard part.
Yeah, the hard part being building product, selling to customers, and it makes software seem so easy at the end of the day. So yeah, I respect hardware founders immensely because there's just way more capital requirements to do it, and supply chain and all that. Whereas I can just whip up some code and publish it to the internet and maybe company. So a lot of respect there. But I want to thank you for joining Founders Flow. And where can people find you in Elastic?
So if you want to learn a little bit more about Elastic and the kind of the whole home energy management and battery deployment and fun stuff like that we're doing, you can find our website at elasticenergy.io. If you want to watch me shitpost on Twitter, I'm at Benjamin Hilborn. And yeah, that's probably the biggest thing. Or I'm on LinkedIn. Anyone can always add me on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
I'm the guy with the crazy hair.
Thanks so much, Ben, for your time.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt.